Welcome everybody, my name is Lida Liberopoulou, and in this video we're going to talk about some interesting historical details about Pentiment's Lenhardt Müller, more specifically about his Wheellock gun and his windmill. The Wheellock gun. Who is Lenhardt? He's the Miller of Tassing, the 16th century Bavarian town where the game takes place, and it's even in his name, Lenhardt Müller. He is one of the richest people in town and also one of the most despised characters in the game. He has a lot of contempt for the peasants, which he expresses openly and has no problem exploiting and blackmailing them when they are in need, especially their wives. There are even some hints that one of the peasants' children is actually Lenhardt's. He's also abusive towards his own son and wife, and his actions are at least partially responsible for the tragic events of Act 2. He's basically a But there are also a couple of very interesting details about him. He owns a firearm which he displays prominently in his house and uses it twice, when he goes hunting with Andreas in the mountains and during the events of the peasant uprising. And this is not your regular musket. This is a Wheellock rifle, the first self-igniting firearm and a pretty fancy piece of technology for a place like Tassing. Wheellock weapons, as the name suggests, have a rotating steel wheel that was cranked before use. After being released by pulling the trigger, the wheel rotated against a piece of pyrite and created sparks which ignited the gunpowder into the barrel. The matchlock guns that preceded them needed a burning cord of slow match to be set and ready for the gun to fire. The main advantage of the Wheellock is that it can be instantly fired even in rainy and windy conditions. On the other hand, its mechanism is very complex. It is constructed by very skilled gunsmiths and is really expensive. This is why Lenhardt, the richest man in Tassing, can afford it and essentially use it as a status symbol for his wealth. There are even some fancy decorations on it. As we see in game, they were not that accurate, so eventually they were replaced by the much cheaper and much more accurate flintlock gun. We even see one in Act 3 used by the gamekeeper. There's also the small question of whether Lenhardt would have been allowed to have this weapon at all. In 1521, the Emperor Charles V issued the Imperial Augsburg firearms mandate, which restricted the use of firearms to authorized individuals. Of course, Lenhardt is rich and influential enough to probably get this authorization, so this restriction would not apply to him. The windmill. There's also Lenhardt's windmill, and this is a bit of a weird one. It's on top of a hill right next to the ruins of the Roman aqueduct at the outskirts of Tassing. It's a distinct landmark and plays a very important role by the end of Act 2. And Lenhardt is very proud of it. When you first talk to him, he says that it's the gem of the Alps and mentions that it's also the only windmill in Bavaria. And you might say, well, what's weird about that? Maybe the guy was ahead of his time, bringing a new technology in the region. Well, guess what? Even today, you can't find any windmills in the Bavarian Alps or any other part of the Alps. In fact, Europe is full of ancient, still functioning windmills, but very rarely you'll find them on top of mountain ranges. If you know of any, please leave a comment because I couldn't find one. The reason is that although there can be strong winds on the Alps, they are not consistent enough to have a productive windmill. The only part of the mountain range where windmills could possibly be productive are on the highest point where there are no obstructions or in wind corridors. But placing mills in these locations would make it very difficult to access them on a daily basis, and also the strong winds that occur there could cause severe damage to them. This is the reason why the only mills you find in the Alps are water mills. Obviously, there are a ton of consistent, strong streams and rivers in the area, and in fact, there is a stream with a waterfall right next to Tassing. So, why is this windmill here? Did the designers make a mistake? I don't think so. I think that this windmill is a reference, or rather a homage, to a painting by Peter Bruegel called The Procession to Calvary. The painting shows Christ's procession towards Calvary Hill, where he will be crucified. But unlike the usual depiction of this event, where the cross and Christ are the focus, this painting contains hundreds of small characters separated into dozens of very detailed scenes going about their everyday lives. It also contains references to historical events like the persecution of Protestants by Emperor Philip that was happening in the Netherlands at the time. And in the middle of the painting, presiding over all this on top of a large rock, is a Dutch windmill. In fact, Josh Scheuer, the game's director, mentioned in an interview the painting's influence on the game.
I had this line in my mind from, there's a film which is based on a book, which is based on a painting. The painting is Peter Bruegel the Elder's The Procession to Calvary. And there was a big book written about the painting called The Mill and the Cross. And then there's a Polish movie made about it. And one of the things that Bruegel said while he was creating the painting in the film is, my painting needs to be big enough to hold everything, everyone. And so I had from the beginning, I was like, I want to show everyone. Like, I want to show peasants and craftspeople and nuns and anchoresses and printers and millers and noble people and executioners and tinkers and Romani and Jews. Like, I want to show everyone.
Yeah, this game does show everyone, and not just as faint shadows in the background, but as interesting, well-designed characters that tell a full story of their own. An incredibly ambitious endeavor that, at least for me, Sawyer and his team just knocked out of the park. I must say here that Pentiment happens to be one of my favorite games in recent years, if not my favorite. As for my next video, it's gonna be on Fallout New Vegas. Both games were made by Obsidian. They are full of historical details, and history plays a very important role in both of them, although in very different ways. Also, Fallout New Vegas happens to be my favorite game of all time. So expect a new video soon. Subscribe and Ave atque Vale.